Hey guys, it's Vince with Green Joe Coffee Truck, and today I am doing a taste testing. I am reviewing a coffee. So reviewing coffee is something I've always been interested in. I used to teach a class at, this is when I was running two coffee trucks full time. I used to teach a class down at the University of New Mexico. It was a history of coffee course. It was a wonderful course where basically I would trace the origins of coffee. And as I traced the origins of coffee, we would then sample the coffee from that specific origin. And we just had a blast. We had a really good time. I really enjoyed digging into the history of those different areas of coffee, and it's something I've always wanted to do. So one of the gals that went through the coffee truck crash course that I have, her name's Marnie. She is opening a coffee shop and a coffee cart. And she said, Vince, she called me up. She had some espresso questions for me. She said, Vince, you got to try this coffee. And so I said, okay, we'll send it down. So she sent me down this coffee. This is La Union, Colombia. So a little bit of history on this coffee. It comes out of the La Union municipality. La Union municipality is home to Casa, Granojalas, which is actually Colombia's largest wine producer. So that's kind of interesting. Apparently this region puts out good coffee and good wine. So it's in the Narino region. And in the Narino regions, southwest part of Colombia, it borders up against Ecuador. What's really interesting about this particular region is it's home to 5 volcanoes. And so if any of you have studied coffee or wine, then you'll often see that there's a correlation between the quality of coffee, the elevation in which these are produced, and of course the volcanic activities, the sediments of the volcano. And what that does is that leads to good soil, essentially. It provides a very specific, unique taste. A little back history on Narino. I'll read this from Coffee Hunter. If you haven't been to their blog, they have a wonderful blog that puts out a bunch of good quality information. They say Narino initially became famous during Colombia's independence, early 1800s, and is one of the few states in Colombia that sided heavily with the crown instead of the independent armies. Nearby Pasto was an important town and was the center of commerce. Residents had every reason to side with peace and stability, not the change of the status quo. After heavy fighting in different parts of Ecuador and Colombia, the Spaniards and the revolutionaries eventually met in Huanambu Canyon. Huanambu is quite a name. Where steep ridges came down to meet at a small river. Here, a fight took place on top of a very thin bridge, and after heavy losses, the revolutionaries were able to drive back the Spaniards and continue south to complete the battle for independence. So a lot of history to this particular region. I thought that was really interesting. There is a plethora of national parks in this particular region. My favorite was this island preserve that looked like a turtle coming out of the water, the turtle's back. The name of it is Santuario de Flora Isla de la Corota. And took a look at this place and said, man, that would be amazing to check out. It's right on the edge of this lake. So while I was at it, I went in there and dug up some Airbnb prices. Here I'll show you the Airbnb, $77 for a 5-bed lake house. Isn't that amazing? So yeah, okay, so let's talk coffee. So this particular coffee has 3 varietals, Castillo, Catura, and Colombia. And why is that important, the different varieties or varietals of coffee? Well, that comes down to the genetic pool. Essentially what they're doing is they're mixing the genes of the different kind of species or varietals of the coffee. And that's more of a protectant for the immune system of the coffee bean. What happens is when you use just a pure species or a pure varietal, then that varietal is now subject to disease and illness. If any of you have ever owned a purebred dog, you've had to experience that. With us, we have a Chihuahua, and the teeth go bad. Labradors, the hips go bad, or German Shepherds, or even the old monarchy of the English kingdom and their anemias. So basically, failure to intermingle or to bring in different species into the genetic pool will ultimately lead to an illness or susceptibility to an illness. In Colombia, what they had particularly, and they've been in other regions as well, leaf rust, excuse me. And so that's a fungus that grows on the actual leaf itself. And what it does is it impedes photosynthesis to the leaf. And of course that alters the crops of coffee. 2008, it knocked out 30% of the crops. So that's a third. It's huge, huge deficit. Keeping the gene pool mix is ultimately a better, a more sustainable farming technique. Okay, so the farmers, this particular bean is part of the FUDAM Association, FUDAM. The FUDAM Association started in 2000 with only 7 members. It's currently up to 300 members. And their specialty, what they focus on is high quality fields and sustainable crops. These guys are Rainforest Alliance. They are the true certified organic, and they focus on good farming techniques. But they work their tail off. The farmers they're usually wearing multiple hats. They go pick beans in the morning, they depulp in the afternoons, and all of the associated work that comes with farming. The depulping is manual. I'll show you a picture of that. You can see they're literally working the depulper manually back and forth, trying to isolate the seed. The families and neighbors kind of come together to help with these process. This is very community oriented. They take the waste that comes off of the depulping process and they use that for fertilizer. So they just put that right back into the ecosystem. The fermentation process for this particular bean, 16 to 24 hours. In the region itself can last out to 48 hours. And because this region's at high altitude, it's sitting at 1,600 to 2,100 meters. To put in perspective, that's a mile to almost about a mile and a half, which is like, Denver, Santa Fe, right? Like these high rocky, Colorado rocky cities sit at that elevation. Pagosa Springs is that elevation. So these guys are high up, right? And that high altitude plus the wind and the sun is just, all of it is relative low humidity, which ultimately means a better drying process. So once they're done with the depulping and the fertilization and moving to the drying, they put them inside small little houses called Casa. If any of you know what elbas means, please by all means throw it in the comment. Tried so much to look for it, I couldn't find it anywhere. So what is elbas? I don't know. But here you can see that they have these little houses where they dry them out at, and then once of course the bean is done drying, it gets shipped, gets processed for shipping. All right, so that's the history on this coffee. Well, what do you say we try this one out? So I did 2 processes. I did a cold brew process, and then I'm going to do a pour over. So the cold brew I did. So far with the cold brew, I've strained it through the metal. I have not strained it through my number 4 Lita filters. So I'm going to get started on that. All right. All I'm doing here is rinsing the filter. And once that's done, I will zero it out. And so again, this is just cold brew, 1 ounce of beans to 5 ounces of water in a semi-coarse grind, extracted for 18 hours, and then pulled off, and it creates a concentrate. And I'm just going to dilute the concentrate here. So it looks like that gave me 16 ounces, and originally I extracted 25 ounces of water is what I put into 5 ounces of coffee. So 30 ounces total, right? And that's usually what I find is I get about half the concentrate of the total amount of weight that I start off with. So a little geeky, a little bit more detailed than I need to be, but whatever, it's fun. So as I get down to the lower parts here, I probably have like 3 or 4 ounces inside here. The sediment starts kind of clogging up the filter. So I kind of just rotate it in this circle so that I kind of move around the different parts of the filter, speed up the filtration process. as you can imagine, it's kind of a pain in the butt if you're trying to do this like in a commercial setting and try to produce like, 5 pounds of coffee, cold brew or something like that. If you're working on like 200 or 400 ounces of concentrate, I think something like this wouldn't be feasible. So for those particular cases, I just use the big toddy paper filters plus the cheesecloth. But for, like just everyday house use, I just use one of the Melita filters because it's what I have at the house. It's easy to use. I already have them, and I think they do a pretty good job on filtration. So, yeah. So takes a little bit longer, but I don't mind. I'm not in any rush. Okay, so I got some filtered water here. So so it's 1 part coffee to 2 parts filtered water. My Rail Yards Games glass here. So, all right, let's give this a shot. It's definitely got like a nice caramel color to it. It's smooth, definitely very like citrusy. A lot of high notes right on kind of like the tip of the tongue. So like, I always have a difficult time distinguishing citrus notes, but I can tell when it's like a citrus note. It's very fruity. It's very not tart, but it's just a lot's happening right on the front of my tongue as opposed to a lot of the oils tend to sit in the back. So this one's right up front. It's light. It's good. It's really good. I don't have any like, there's like no oil. It's very smooth with some really high notes in it. I think it's an accurate description. They describe it as orange, cocoa, and apricot marmalade. I think definitely a lot of citrus notes. I would agree 100%. It's got a lot of citrus notes. Yeah, I really like that. That's really good. It's really good. All right, let's try Pourover. That's a nice fluffy bean. It's real powdery. It's real fluffy, almost like fluffy popcorn. So I'm going to brew this at a 1:16 ratio. Normally I do a 1:15 ratio, but I kind of want to string it out a little bit so I can kind of taste those mid notes, those high notes, especially now that I've tasted it in the cold brew. I really want to see how those citrus notes turn out in the pour over. So we're going to kind of dilute it ever so slightly than what I would normally do. That smells good. If you're new to pour over, so I usually hit about 6 ounces. I'm gonna do a 30-ounce pour total, and I hit it with 6 ounces in the beginning. And they call that the wetting phase. You're just trying to get some beans wet. Excuse me. But this is the time where I usually like to stop and smell the coffee. I love that smell of like that first. When the hot water hits the coffee, that first smell of brewing. That is good. Now, I don't advise if you work in a coffee shop, probably don't do that in your coffee shop. So what I'm doing right here is I'm just mixing. Okay, I'm just kind of trying to get all the beans to mix together. And then after that, I'm going to pour. So I did 6 there. I'm going to pour it pretty close to 12, maybe even up to 15. So I'm at 12 now. I'm going to keep coming up. There's 13 ounces, 14 ounces. That's 15 ounces. So I'm going to bring up the water and just kind of let it chill for a little bit. As the water starts to pull it down, it'll leave a little ring of grounds on the paper. I'm literally going to pick the thing up and swirl it, catch those grinds, bring them back into the center. So it's starting to kind of settle down. So you can see the rings here. These rings, I'm just going to pick the whole thing up. See if I can do it with one hand here. And I'm just going to swirl. I'm going to try to grab those grinds with the water. Just swirl it back in. I didn't quite catch all of them, so when I go to pour, I'll pull those grinds back into the center with the water. So I'm at 15 now. Pouring again. 19. And that's 23 ounces is where I'm at now. And now everything looks like it's mixed really well. Like there's not like beans hanging out on the side. They're not all floating at the top. Everything's in there nice and well. You can see here everything's mixed in together. And that's what you want when you're brewing coffee. You want to give every grind an equal opportunity to brew. Okay, so this is the last pour. I'm going to take it all the way to 30 ounces now. 30. All right. All righty. So here we are. Ooh. I got some hot water. Let me dump that out. Okay. Ooh, that looks good. Definitely smell that like orange citrusy note right there.
It's pretty short, yeah. It's just a quick little one to make sure you all know.
So good.
More stuff will come out about it, so we're gonna send some email or some updates about everything. But basically, the schedule will remain the same. So school will start at 8:45.
A lot of citrus, a lot of things happening on the front of my palate. I kind of taste like more of like almost like a cranberry, maybe like a cranberry orange is kind of what I'm getting out of the coffee, which is really interesting. Smooth finishes right at the front, doesn't come to the back of the palate. This one's not a dark roast. This one's a nice medium roast. That's good. Oh, that's really good. It's so good. Listen, Marnie, thank you so much for sending this to me. I really appreciate it. What a great research project. I really enjoy digging into the history of both La Union and the Narino region and Colombia and how these farmers just work their tail off to bring us really high quality coffee. It just makes me take a second out and just appreciate it a little bit more. If you guys are interested in trying this coffee out, it is at JBC Coffee Roasters. So that's J as in Java, B as in Bravo, C as in Charlie, coffeeroasters.com. I will put the link in. One of the things I did note is that they give a discount to your first bag if you sign up for their newsletter. I don't get anything from them. I just happen to notice that's one of the business practices they have. So kudos to you guys. I hope you get some business from the video. And I enjoyed this. And if you guys have a coffee that you'd like me to try, or put it in the comments below and I'll dig into it from there. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Vince of Green Joe Coffee.